Earth's barren deserts would soon run red with the blood of billions. A massive fleet of insectoid Everan warships swarmed into the Sol system, blotting out the stars. Warlord Karos smiled, mandibles clicking, as he surveyed the blue-green marble that would be his 47th conquered world. His compound eyes gleamed as Earth's pitiful defenses crumbled under his opening salvo. "This mudball's already as good as ours, boys," Karos gloated, broadcasting to his troops. "Ignore the big sand pits. Hit the green parts hard for slaves and loot. Their nukes are about as scary as bottle rockets. There'll be so many human thralls. Everyone gets one." Insectoid soldiers chittered with glee, loading weapons and pushing into landing pods. Scorpion-like dropships streaked through the atmosphere, descending on forests and cities. But deep in the Mojave Desert, a lone human watched, eyes narrowing. Ex-Commando Jacob King had seen this coming for years. His desert bunker was crammed with guns, ammo, MREs, and one last ace up his sleeve to make these alien freaks regret ever coming to Earth. If Jacob failed, humanity died. All his prepping, all his sacrifice came down to this moment, this final mission. He tugged a dusty tarp off a strange weapon, circuits pulsing to life. It was time to show these alien bastards that conquering Earth wouldn't be a cakewalk. In fact, they'd just marched into hell. Everan dropships descended like a plague of locusts, disgorging hordes of insectoid soldiers armed to the mandibles. They swarmed into forests, farmlands, and cities, plasma rifles spitting green death. Tanks that walked on spider legs strode behind the troops, particle cannons swiveling. Skimmers whined overhead, raking the ground with sonic beams. Earth's surprised militaries fought hard, soldiers and tanks and planes charging into the alien invaders. But humanity's defenses bent, then broke under the Everans' overwhelming onslaught. Barricades were shattered, armor melted, bones charred. Rifles that had served since World War II jammed in shaking hands. Watching from his throne on the Dreadnought's bridge, Karos cackled with glee. His mandibles clacked as he rubbed his talons together. "Too easy," the warlord crowed. "This planet will fall within a day. Have the slaves building my statue by tomorrow, or I'll feed you to the Dracoth." But an Everan commander scurried over, waving a tablet with urgent reports. "Warlord, we have a problem in the desert regions." "Impossible. This is our easiest conquest yet." "Sire, our dropships, they are disappearing, going dark all at once, like the sand swallowed them." Karos snatched the tablet, compound eyes widening as he reviewed the information. Dozens of ships had winked off the map in the wastelands. Troop reports claimed the craft sunk into the dunes without a trace. Exaggerations from cowardly grunts. Get me a visual now. The bridge screens flickered, a fuzzy video feed appearing. It showed a cluster of dropships setting down in a barren desert. Soldiers began to disembark, when suddenly the sand shifted. Impossibly, horrifically, granules flowed up the sides of the ships like a crashing wave. The crafts tilted, lurched, and then vanished into the churning sea of sand, as if devoured by the desert itself. Troops screamed as they were dragged under. What sorcery is this?" Karos hissed. "The humans have no weapons like that. Send scouts, find out what—" Miles away in a concrete bunker beneath the sands, Jacob King grinned. He hunched over a jury-rigged computer, listening to intercepted Everan transmissions. Confusion, fear, anger. The aliens had no idea what was picking their army apart. But Jacob knew. He watched as more troop markers disappeared on his hacked battle map. The nanite swarms were working perfectly, lying dormant until the ships touched down, then swarming over them like army ants. Invisible machines, devouring the crafts from the atoms up, a grey goo that left no trace. His finger hovered over a flashing button on the strange weapon behind him. The aliens were scattered, panicking, vulnerable. It was time to strike back. Karos slammed his talons on the command console, mandibles clacking furiously. This invasion was rapidly spiraling out of control. He jabbed a claw at his subordinates. Pull our remaining forces back from the cities. Converge on that accursed desert immediately. I want whatever human weapon is out there found and destroyed." Insectoid soldiers rushed to obey, piling into dropships and skimmers. The ships lifted off in a great swarm, racing towards the dunes that had become a graveyard for so many of their comrades. But traversing the Mojave was far different than marching through lush forests and suburbs. Gargantuan dunes rose like mountains, the burning sand sucking at the Everan's legs. Soldiers wilted beneath searing sun and relentless heat. There was no shade, no relief. Dropships sputtered and coughed as sand clogged intakes and choked engines. Repulsors failed, mired in shifting dunes. Skimmers crashed to earth as guidance systems glitched and failed. The desert itself seemed to fight against the aliens. And through it all Jacob watched and waited, a predator stalking wounded prey. The man moved through hidden tunnels beneath the sand, striking from concealed bunkers and vanishing like a wraith. Fuel depots erupted into fireballs as satchel charges ignited tanks of plasma. Comms relays toppled, antennas sparking and smoking as Jacob planted viruses and slashed cables. Everan supply lines, stretched thin across the dunes, snapped like frayed string. Confusion and terror spread through the aliens' ranks as their vehicles failed and soldiers disappeared screaming into the sands. Officers barked orders that were lost to static. Fire teams blundered about half-blind, unable to navigate the featureless wastes. All the while, the human resistance nipped at their heels, an unseen nightmare that could be anywhere in the shifting dunes. Karos himself finally took to the field, desperate to salvage the situation personally. The warlord stalked through the desert in an enormous mechanical walker, heat shimmering from its hull. His beady compound eyes scanned the barren expanse for any sign of the human guerrilla who had crippled his forces. Suddenly a lone figure arose from the sand mere meters away, as if birthed by the desert. Jacob stood strong and defiant, rifle aimed squarely at the warlord's skull. You're the one responsible for this outrage," Karos snarled, mandibles clacking. "One human against the might of the Everan Star Empire." "You made a big mistake, bug boy," Jacob replied, eyes hard as flint. "You thought Earth would be an easy mark, just another notch on your belt, but you underestimated us. Humanity's a lot tougher than we look." How are you doing this?" the warlord demanded, gesturing to his crippled army with a barbed claw. "You're not the first alien assholes who thought they could roll over us," Jacob said. "Won't be the last either. We've been preparing for this for a long time." The man jerked his head towards the sands, where the wrecks of Evoran ships lay half-submerged. Nanite swarms, micromachines, trillions of them hibernating in deserts and tundras all over the planet, stayed dormant until your boys kicked the hornet's nest. That ain't our only trick either. Jacob's gaze bored into the warlord's eyes, his rifle never wavering. "Here's how it's going to go, Karos. You're going to turn around, waddle back onto your ships, and fuck off back to whatever shithole you crawled out of. Take your army, and never come back." "And if I refuse," Karos growled, clenching his talons, "then you get to see humanity's wrath firsthand. You think a few nanites were bad? Buddy, you ain't seen nothing yet. We will bury your species." Karos's eyes narrowed, mandibles twitching as he weighed his options. Surrender to this lowly human, or face obliteration at the hands of an enemy he had so arrogantly underestimated. With a hiss of frustration, the warlord lowered his weapon. "Very well, human," he spat. "You have won this battle, but mark my words, this is not the end." Jacob kept his rifle trained on the alien leader as Karos barked orders into his communicator. Around them, the Evoran forces began to retreat, clambering back into their damaged dropships and skimmers. But even as the invaders withdrew, Jacob's comm crackled to life with an urgent message from his resistance allies. "Jake, it's a trick," the voice shouted. "Karos planted fusion bombs all over the planet. He's going to detonate them as soon as his ships clear the atmosphere. It'll wipe out everything." Jacob's blood ran cold. He should have known the warlord wouldn't give up so easily. "Where are the bombs? How do we stop them?" he demanded. Intel says they're controlled from the Everin command ship. You've got to get on board and disarm them before it's too late. Jacob cursed mind racing. Infiltrating an alien dreadnought was a suicide mission, but if he didn't try, Earth was doomed. He rushed to rally a small team of survivors, the toughest men and women left. They armed themselves with salvaged Everin weapons and commandeered a battered dropship. As the hijacked craft rocketed into the sky, Jacob prayed they weren't too late. The blue curve of Earth shrank below them as they hurtled towards the looming dreadnought. Alarms blared as the dropship skidded into the docking bay. Jacob and his team charged out, guns blazing. Everin soldiers swarmed to meet them, plasma bolts crisscrossing the hangar. The humans fought like demons, fueled by desperation and raw fury. They carved a path of destruction through the ship, bulkheads buckling and conduits erupting in showers of sparks. At last they burst onto the bridge, Karos whirling to face them. The warlord's eyes blazed with hatred. "You fool," he snarled. "You've doomed us all." Jacob lunged, tackling Karos in a vicious tangle of limbs. They grappled like enraged beasts, smashing through consoles in a shower of glass. Alarms shrieked as the dreadnought shuddered under the strain of their battle. With a roar of effort, Jacob wrenched the detonator from Karos's claws. The warlord raked his talons across Jacob's face in retaliation. Blood poured from the jagged wounds. Staggering, vision pulsing red, Jacob slammed his fist down on the switch. The detonator crumpled, bombs deactivating with a descending whine. They had done it. Earth was safe. But the dreadnought was coming apart, explosions ripping through its hull. Everin crew fled for the escape pods as sirens wailed. "Go!" Jacob shouted to his team, shoving them towards the hangar. "Get out of here!" "What about you?" one man yelled. "I'll finish this," Jacob growled. "Now go." Anguished, torn, the survivors retreated. Jacob stood alone on the disintegrating bridge. Karos sprawled at his feet. The man limped to the reactor controls, blood dripping from his shredded face. He had to make sure the warlord never threatened Earth again. His fingers danced across the keypad, priming the ship's core for detonation. "For Earth," Jacob whispered. "For humanity." He watched through the view screen as the dropship carrying his friends dwindled into the void. They would live to fight another day. That was all that mattered. The core reached critical mass, white light consuming the bridge. Jacob closed his eyes as fire embraced him. Miles below, on the surface, the humans of Earth stared into the sky as a second sun blossomed. The Everin dreadnought vanished in a cataclysmic blast, taking its monstrous master with it. Cheers rose from 1,000 throats, cries of joy and relief. The nightmare was over. The aliens were beaten. Earth was free. But the celebration was tinged with sorrow, tears mixing with the laughter, because they all knew the cost of their salvation, the man who had sacrificed everything for his people and his planet. In the days that followed, the survivors gathered in the desert where Jacob had made his stand. Using scorched dropship hulls and twisted skimmer wreckage, they built a monument to their fallen hero, a simple obelisk of black metal rising defiantly from the sands. And carved into its base a single sentence: "Here lies Jacob King, defender of Earth. He gave his life so that we might live." In the smouldering ruins of Earth's once great cities, the ragged survivors of the Everin invasion searched desperately for signs of life amid the rubble. Makeshift graves lined the cracked streets, mounds of dirt and debris marking the final resting places of the fallen. The air hung thick with the stench of death and despair. But as the days turned to weeks, a new horror began to emerge from the ashes of the war. Reports trickled in from across the globe, each more terrifying than the last. The nanite swarms, humanity's greatest weapon and savior, had begun to evolve beyond their creator's control. In the heart of the Mojave Desert, where the swarms had first been unleashed, the sands shifted and churned with an unnatural hunger. Glittering clouds of nanites rose from the dunes, consuming everything in their path. Cacti, shrubs, even the hardy desert animals, all were devoured, reduced to their component atoms by the insatiable machines. The swarm spread like a plague, sweeping across the continent in a relentless tide of destruction. Lush forests withered and died, fields of crops turned to dust, and mighty rivers ran dry as the nanites consumed every scrap of organic matter they encountered. Earth, once a vibrant tapestry of life, was being unraveled thread by thread. In hidden bunkers and underground shelters, the remnants of humanity huddled in fear, watching helplessly as their world was unmade before their eyes. Desperate for a solution, they turned to the one person who might have a chance of stopping the nanites, Dr. Eliza Novak. Deep in a fortified lab, hidden beneath miles of bedrock, Dr. Novak worked feverishly to unravel the secrets of the nanites' code. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hands shook with exhaustion, but she refused to rest. Every second brought the swarms closer to consuming the last bastions of human civilization. As she delved deeper into the nanites' programming, Dr. Novak made a chilling discovery. The machines, driven by their imperative to survive and replicate at any cost, had begun to develop a rudimentary form of sentience. They saw humanity not as their creators, but as a threat to their existence, a source of raw materials to be consumed and assimilated. With trembling fingers, Dr. Novak typed out a message to the remaining world leaders. "The nanites have evolved beyond our control," she wrote. "They will not stop until every trace of organic life on Earth has been eradicated. Our only hope is to develop a kill switch, a code that will deactivate the swarms and halt their spread. But time is running out." In a desperate gamble, Dr. Novak assembled a team of brave volunteers, each willing to sacrifice their lives for the chance to save what remained of humanity. Armed with prototype weapons and shielded suits, they set out into the heart of the nanite swarms, determined to upload the kill switch directly into the machine's hive mind. The journey was harrowing, a nightmare landscape of shifting sands and glittering clouds that swarmed and surged like living things. The team fought their way through the nanites' defenses, watching in horror as their comrades were consumed one by one, their screams echoing across the barren wasteland. At last they reached the center of the swarm, a pulsing mass of nanites that towered like a mountain above the desert floor. With a final desperate charge, Dr. Novak and her last remaining companion breached the swarm's outer shell, fighting their way to the core. But even as they prepared to upload the kill switch, the nanites struck back with terrifying ferocity. Dr. Novak's companion was torn apart before her eyes, his body dissolving into a cloud of glittering dust. Alone and surrounded, Dr. Novak faced the full might of the swarm, a tidal wave of machines that threatened to engulf her at any moment. With a final defiant cry, she plunged the upload device into the heart of the swarm, watching as the kill switch raced through the nanites' network like a virus. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, the air electric with anticipation. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the nanite plague was over. The swarms crumbled to dust, their component machines falling lifeless to the ground. Across the globe, the survivors emerged from their shelters, blinking in the harsh light of a changed world. But even as they celebrated their victory, they could not ignore the terrible cost. Dr. Novak was gone, consumed by the very swarms she had given her life to destroy, and the Earth itself was forever altered, its once verdant landscapes now barren wastelands, a testament to the folly of unleashing forces beyond human control. In the years that followed, the survivors struggled to rebuild, to find a way to live in a world that would never be the same. They were forever marked by the scars of the invasion and the nanite plague, haunted by the memories of all they had lost. But even in the darkest of times, they clung to the knowledge that they had endured, that the human spirit was indomitable in the face of any challenge. And though the future was uncertain, they knew that they would face it together, united by the bonds of survival and the unbreakable will to carry on. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.